Hello and welcome back. In this video, we are going to set up our database. We are going to use MySQL database. Now, the MySQL database that we're going to set up and use, it's not going to be complex. There's not going to be any complex MySQL query. And also, to point out, we are not going to be writing raw MySQL queries. Instead, we are going to be using an object relational model, that is an ORM. Okay, so we are not going to write any raw MySQL queries, and the setup and usage, like I already said, it's not going to be complex. We only just want to store user authentication data, and we are only going to have one database. Okay, so we'll make this as easy as possible, and then on your own you can decide to start implementing more features, and then or if you want to learn how to use MySQL, you can do that at the end of the course. Okay, but first, to just point out, I added my config.ts. Okay, so I used what I have here, apart from the APM server URL, APM server token, and APM, enable APM. Every other environment variable is defined here. Okay, so I believe you've already done that as well. Okay, now let's go to the browser, then go to npm. Okay, so go npmjs.com. Now, the object relational model we want to use is called Sequelize. So you can search for Sequelize right here. It's one of the most popular ORMs, okay, out there. As you can see here, it's very popular, has over 1 million installs already in the week. Okay, so it's an easy to use and promise based Node.js ORM tool for Postgres, MySQL, MariaDB, SQLite, DB2, Microsoft SQL Server, and Snowflake. Now for us here, we are only going to be setting it up for MySQL, okay, to be used with the MySQL database. Okay, now one thing I like about this is if you already have an experience with using Mongoose or setting up Mongoose, it's going to be easy for you to set this up as well and use. Okay, so yeah, you can go to the sequelize.org, yeah, documentation page, and then you can just see how to use here from this page. Okay, so there's not much information here, so we have to use the Sequelize documentation page. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is to install Sequelize. Okay, so I'll click on this and then open my terminal and then install Sequelize. Okay, so have that installed, and then while that is being installed, in my source folder I'll create a file. I'll call this database.ts. okay, so this is where we are going to set up our database. Let me go ahead and add our logger. Okay, so import logger from Winston. Okay, and then const log of type logger equals to Winston logger, and then I'll need to pass in my config.elasticsearch. Let me import config first. Okay, let's see. Okay, so I have to import it and then make the changes. So this is going to be @auth. Okay, config.elasticsearch URL, and then we add a name, and then we add the level. So here I'll just call this auth database server. Auth database server. Now, if to just recap, the reason why we are adding this right here, so that in the logs, maybe if you have an error or in this file, or if you have a log you want to see in the Kibana dashboard, with this name here, you know exactly where the log is coming from. Okay, so this is in the auth database server file. Okay, so we have our database set up, or the logger instead. Let me go and fix this. Okay, now let's go back to the Sequelize page. Okay, so we already installed Sequelize, and let's go to the getting started. Okay, like we already saw, we can use for Postgres, MySQL, MariaDB, and the rest. For us, it's only Postgres we want to use it for. Okay, we already have it installed. Now it says that we already have to manually install one of the drivers. So for MySQL, we can install this. Okay, so you can copy this for MySQL, and then you install the driver as well. Okay, so go ahead and have that installed. And then connecting to a database, we need to import, and then we create an instance of SQLize, and then we pass some information to the object, okay, or into the SQLize instance. So let's go ahead, import SQLize. Okay, so I'll say import SQLize, okay, from SQLize. Now let us create an instance. Now we are going to import that instance because we are going to use it in our services. Okay, so export const, I'll call this SQLize equal to new SQLize. Okay, this is how we create an instance. Okay, now creating an instance this way means that the SQLize right here was created as or was exported as a class, so we need to create an instance. Now we need to specify some properties. Now here you can see the first property is the dialect. So the dialect is just like the type of database. If it's SQLite, if it's Postgres, or if it's MySQL or whatever database, that is what the dialect here means. So for us, the dialect we want to use is MySQL. So if it is Postgres, it will be Postgres, okay, Postgres SQL or whatever database name right there. Okay, now do we want to log information? No, I don't want to log. I'll set logging to false. Okay, and then there's another option we want to add. Remember, we already installed MySQL 2. Okay, you remember we just installed this right here, MySQL 2, and we want to add an option called dialect options. Okay, and the dialect options we want to add will be multiple statements, and I'll set this to true. Okay, so what this means is if you want to run maybe later you decide to have more complex queries and you want to be able to run multiple queries at the same time, then we're setting it to true. With this command here, you should be able to run multiple queries. Okay, like I already said, our for us using MySQL here, it's not going to be complex at all. There's not going to be any complications. It's going to be easy to set up. If you already have experience with using MongoDB and Mongoose, then it should be easy for us to use and also to set up. Okay, so these are the options that we are going to pass into the SQLize instance, where the dialect is MySQL. We don't want to set any login, and we set dialect options to multiple statements, set it to true so that we can use multiple statements. Okay, then the next thing, let us set up the database connection. I'll create a file, export is going to be asynchronous function, and I can call this database connection. Okay, this is going to return promise of type void because it's not going to return any data. Okay, like I already said, the reason why we are exporting this SQLize instance is because we will need it inside our services when we want to make our queries. Okay, so we need this right here. I'm going to add a try catch. Okay, as usual, let me log.error auth service. I can say unable to connect to database, and then I can do auth.log. For me, I just prefer doing it this way. You could decide to add only log.log. Okay, so I just decided to add this to information so that I see this, and then this one also, it will be displayed but also sent to the Kibana dashboard. Okay, and then I'll say auth service, then what's the name of the function? Database connection method error. Okay, and then I'll pass the error object. Okay, so we have the logs in the catch block. Now for here, in order for us to just create the connection itself, okay, we've created an instance. In order for us to create the connection, we do something simple. We just say await SQLize dot authenticate. and this is what will create the connection. Okay, and here you can add log.info. Okay, you want to add a log, say auth service MySQL database connection has been established. All of these logs will really make sense once we deploy to Kubernetes, and then we start a new pod. Okay, we create our deployment and then we start a new pod. We are going to see these logs. If there's an error with the connection, we are going to see the log. If we're successful, we are going to see this log. Okay, so once we get to the Kubernetes part, all of this is going to really make sense. Okay, and then maybe later you can decide to add more descriptive logs. Okay, so this is just all we need to do right here in this file in order for us to create our database connection. We are not using this database connection function yet. So once we set up our server file, we are going to use this database connection function. And then once we start creating our models, because we will need to create models, we will need to then create our services. We'll use this SQLized instance. Okay. We'll stop here. In the next video, we continue with our setup.